Now then, I'm another Magento dev, and in this video I'm going to show you how you can make that transition to headless Magento using Vue Storefront. Yeah, it was dodgy in the past. I know it was. I don't know what was wrong with it. It was half finished, but it seems to be finished now. I'm going to show you how to install it. First of all, I'm going to go through my process of getting it working on my local host, but there is still one massive problem with it, and you've got to stick to the end of the video to find out what that is. Right then, here we go then. So, full disclosure, I have already installed this once, give it a test run through and what have you in another directory, but I'm going to install it now from scratch in a different directory. The only thing is that I'm keeping the same is that I'm going to use my default my tests so that I use in other tutorials. If you've joined me a lot, you've probably seen that before. So that's the only thing I'm going to keep the same. So I'm going to keep open the other install on my screen for a bit of reference, so I don't have to type everything out. But we're still, we are going to do it from scratch. So what do we need to know from the outset? Well, Node, it only works with Node 16. So you've got to make sure that Node -v, that you're using Node 16. Now that clearly says Node 14. Now if I use NVM, NVM, have a look for that and install it so you can flick between versions. So I'm using version 16 there, 16.13 in fact as well, npm 810 as you can see. So these are the sort of prerequisites for getting this installed and up and running, sort of, and making it work basically. Yarn is sometimes an issue if you've installed it on if you're using Linux, it can be an issue depending on how you've installed it. But Yarn's installed on this version of npm. Just double check that when you switch to 16. Make sure that you have got Yarn installed on 16. It's a bit like when you're using Valley and you switch PHP versions, and you can sometimes be missing packages from PHP. Well, Yarn's similar. It can be missing from your NVM, and therefore you need Yarn for the commands in this tutorial to run. So we're going to do it from the docs. The docs are pretty decent, but to be honest, if you're the type of person like myself who don't read good or can't really struggles to follow docs, then watch me do it, and hopefully it'll this video's for you. But also if you just want to see someone run through it, that sometimes helps as well. So that's what I'm going to do. Right then, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to jump into a directory that I'm going to use for sort of installing this. Like, this is going to be my root directory. So I've got a directory there, and I've got a few sort of like demo stores in there. This was the one that I installed previously. So I'm going to set up another version in here. Let's just clear that down. So the first thing it says to do, if you go to these docs here, docs Vue Storefront, obviously just search for Vue Storefront in the internet and you'll always find it. It's telling you in, look, Node 16, but it is specifically Node 16.13 that it seems to work on. It didn't work on a version that I had lower than that, so don't mention that in the docs. So just make sure that you've got that one installed. So this guy is your main install command. Now, people who are familiar with Vue and Nuxt and all these sort of JavaScript frameworks, and by the way, this is called Vue Storefront, but it is actually Nuxt. Nuxt is a wrapper for Vue, so it is actually Nuxt. But so these types of commands are really handy. So all you need to do really is jump into your folder. So this creates a folder based off the directory that you choose in the sort of wizard that comes up next. I did get an error on this last time. Well, it's worked, but then I redid it and it worked again. So it creates a folder off your project name. So before I called it Vue-Store, so this time I'll call it Vue-Store headless, just to have something different. So I'm going to make that my project name. See, obviously you've got all these other platforms here, but we're choosing Magento 2 because we're Magento 2's biggest fans. And Right, so it's pretty straightforward. That it's asking me to use npm. You can use npm. I'm not the biggest fan. I prefer. I don't know why. I don't even know why I say I'm not the biggest fan. It's basically identical to yarn. I just like typing the word yarn instead. But you go with what you want. But what it says in the docs is the next thing to do. Obviously, it recommends. I always follow exactly what it says, just in case, because then you get your yarn lock file, and just in case you don't want any. I don't want any discrepancies between what I'm doing and what the docs say. So now you CD into your project name. So if I just show you there, look, it's created my project. So now I CD into headless, and then I basically just run yarn install, and we'll let this run. So this is all working decent. I'm hoping that sometimes MVM, I don't know why it does it. I've never really got to the bottom of it. But on my machine, it sort of flip flops between using a version of Node and sort of, if I open another terminal, it goes back to 14, then goes back to 16, and then it'll use 16 in my terminal on VS Code. So it does do some odd stuff. So I hope that none of that catches out. But if it does, it might happen to yourself, and you can see me get around it. But if not, it should just install. So we'll just let this do its next thing. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to configure Magento. So obviously it says now, and it says in one of the install videos, basically just throw it up now, just yarn run dev, and away you go. It's not quite that simple, because you've got to configure not only your Vue Storefront, you've got to configure some Nuxt Config in that, but you've got to configure your Magento that you're sort of pulling the data from as well. And to be honest, right, if you're using Docker and all that, then you might need to follow this. If you're using Valet, I was able to start at, or any other sort of local host provider or local server application like Valet. There's others like MAMP and stuff. You're probably going to be able to start from sort of this here. So there's a couple of modules to install, and it gives you the composer addresses there. I mean, I don't know what they're doing with that, but anyway, we'll go composer and install this one, which I've done. I'll just show you over on here that where they're installed and how they're installed, and some specific config around them. Still got this open from. So I've got where is it? That one, Caravel. I keep wanting to say Carvajal, the Real Madrid footballer. Caravel is enabled, and Grey Core Cores, right? I've got both of them installed. Now I haven't tried it without installing those, so I can't tell you if it works without, so feel free to just try it. But I've installed them both, and I think this is key, to be honest. In my env, so I'll just make this bit bigger for you. You can see. So in my env file, I've added a system config. So this obviously edits the system config, just to reset these options. It said it in the docs, look, in the setup, look, to reset these options. And I found it was troublesome using an asterisk in there. So I put in specifically my domain, like if you like, my test domain, because this does actually work from and my GraphQL sort of salt ID there as well. It sort of puts that in for you as part of the install of these two plugins. So it seemed to work better using cause allowed origins with the specific origin I'm coming from. Right, so that's basically the Magento config. So you install. So I'll just go through that again. You can follow it on these docs. This was pretty simple, but it's where you start from that was key. These values are added to your admin by default, but you can go in and check them. It adds the Caravel adds this. Look, of course it was going to do that. It adds those values in for you. Caravel, GraphQL. It adds them values in. We've got 15 and 20. It says in the docs, set that to 1520, so they've been set in. I've, like I say, bunged that in, done the config here, and then basically run the big four, essentially. It's saying there, setup, upgrade, and depending on whether you've got sample data or not. So that all covers the Magento stuff, and it is fairly straightforward. As I say, I'm not sure what actual effect that has on it, but this is the bit where it gets a little bit tricky, particularly if you're not 100%. So say you're a Magento dev, like you probably are because you're watching me. This is where it can get a little bit sort of... you can feel a little bit uncomfortable because it's quite Nuxty, essentially. If you're comfortable with Nuxt, then you're going to be alright with this. But I'll show you where to look for the various things that we're going to need to edit. So I'll just bring up my code editor for setting up the Nuxt bit, and once we've done this, we should be able to run it, no bother. Right, so I'm going to go into my... So that all built out, right? So I'm going to now go into... I'm actually in my folder, right? So I'm going to say... I'm going to open my code editor at this point. So you can see it. Open a terminal. So we'll need that. Right then, so where do we look in here? So the first thing we need to do is copy this env folder, because this is quite an important folder. So we'll say cp env.example over to... what's it, .env? Oh, .env example. Over to .env. So that creates me an env file. Right, and this is where you have to specify your details for your demo store. So be aware of this one here. This is without the HTTPS. So we'll say m24.test, and we'll say m24.test. There actually is a little tip. If your GraphQL comes up with an error, then this ain't going to work. So one of the ways you can check whether this is probably going to work is quickly go to the GraphQL and you should get some JSON, right? And obviously if you're doing that from localhost, it's all right. But you sometimes, if you're in production mode and you may be trying to connect this to a production store out on the internet, if your GraphQL endpoint isn't working and you get an exception report, check into what that is, because it's going to stop this from working as well. Is one of the things that I found out. So yeah, this is the demo store. That's the one I'm trying to replicate. This is my actual Magento store. Right then, next bit. So I need to make sure that all my URLs are changed in here. m24.test. Right, it says checkout URL. So I was tempted to go like that, right, and put in the checkout URL. No, you don't. You just put in the URL again. So it's basically the same, right, all the way through, and that's with an S. And then you change this, because we're not using and if you're not using a CDN, then you just need to set that to IPX, and you need to comment out these two things here. Oh, these two things, yeah. You can leave all this, and you can leave that. Right, so that's basically the env set up and ready to go. Now, another place to just check is in here. It mentions this in the docs as a place where you might want to make some configuration specific to your store. I'm mentioning it because I ain't got a clue what those things are, but it is where the store config seems to be called through to the state of the application. So this is sort of, I think it's saying that this is the entry point to the application, which I'm not 100% sure on. And also what we'll find out is the I18N, so like your store locale is quite important, whether this is going to work or not as well. But I'll show you where to edit that next, and it is in here in the Nuxt.js file. So those of you who are familiar with Nuxt, this file is the config file where you can set a number of variables. Usually, even when you're not obviously connecting it to Magento, you have one of these files in Nuxt, and you make some, and you can basically it's environment settings. It's like an extension of environment settings. As you can see, it's getting stuff from the env file here, and bringing it into here, and then you can further configure it. There's things like your loading screen color and all that type of stuff. So this is where you start making those sort of entry point customizations. So we're going to run it on this port here on localhost 3000, which is all going to be fine. So we'll keep all that the same. The bits, so the boilerplate that comes in if you're in the UK, or if you're not in the US, you're going to have to make changes here. So at my store, my store here is based off the UK. So I've got specific UK options. Now, if you're wondering what your code is, like US is obvious. Example for United Kingdom, someone without experience might think, well, that's UK. And if you're unsure, because it isn't UK, it's actually GB, which means Great Britain. Then you can check it in here. Look, all the codes are actually in here, and you can find the one that's selected, and you can set it. But take my word for it, UK is actually GB. I've set my locales, in my install to English. Also, my country options, just make sure that is set to, because obviously you could run the default country as US and everything else be UK, but because this is connecting to the API, essentially the open GraphQL API, these things need to match basically. So this needs to be ENGB, that needs to be set to GB. This obviously needs to be set to Great British Pounds for me, and then it's giving you the option to add, to already have it set up for multi-store and multi-currency. If you haven't, I'd advise removing that because you don't need it. And the same thing down here, so currency settings, this is one of the places where I found it fell down for me. Great British Pounds, in fact. And we'll get rid of the German one. Okay, this is referring to my store view code. I've not made any changes to it. Oops, I've not made. Oh, Jesus, what am I doing? GBP. I've not made any changes to it. So the where you find that information in your Magento is in stores, all stores, and then it's basically this code here. So you might actually have a different one. It's unlikely, but you might. And then once that's set up, I believe I might have missed something, but we can give it a spin. So I've set all that stuff up. I think we're ready to go. So then essentially you can come in here and you can do yarn dev. I'm hoping. Nah, we're getting an error. Right. Haha, cool. Reminder. Okay, so we have to, because we're running it on localhost, and actually I'm going to do another video on this because I've mentioned this before when trying to use localhost as a server for Magento, even just running Magento. You can't run Magento off it by default, but this plugin might actually, and I'm gonna you might want to tell me in the comments if you've already tried this, but I've installed something called Cert. Now it tells you in the docs to do it. Was it in this part? No, where's the Cert bit? Basically somewhere I saw it. It might have even been in their instructional video. Or it might be in this bit. So it's going through the local stuff, what I've already just touched on. Any further, there we go. So install Cert. Now there's different ways to do this for Windows, for Mac, and for Linux. I'm on Linux, so if you just do Cert install in a search engine, the best site to go to is the GitHub repo, because it gives you all three here. So it tells you, and what I did was I sudo installed this libnSSS3 tools, and then I didn't use brew. I used what did I use? I basically just got it. I'm sure. No, I might use curl. Yeah, I did this one here. So for a Linux user, I can vouch for that. This worked for me basically, and I've got Cert in there now, and you can see it here. So if I do Cert -v, yeah, it's basically coming up. So I might want to do Cert minus version just to show you my version as of today, 1.4.4, and it's really easy to use. You basically just do Cert. And you've got to do this in your directory that you install Magento in. Like you can't, I mean, you might be able to do it locally, globally, sorry, but you want to be creating these files locally because it's looking for them. If you look at my error, it's looking for these .pem files locally. So it's quite an important step. So if you do mkset localhost and it bangs them in there, you can see them, look, they're in there now in my install, which means that this guy's going to run now, I think. Fingers crossed. Yeah, right. Oh, it's throwing it up on a different port because my other one was already in use. So I'm not 100%. We'll see if it works. Why not? We'll see. So we're going for server-side rendering because it's a Nuxt app and it's got all the middleware in there. I mean, go through this at your leisure. I mean, there's a load of stuff to go through, more than the scope of this video, which is just install. I'm not convinced this is going to work on this port because of cause, but we'll give it a whack. Let me proceed. Let me proceed. Let's just try it, maybe because it isn't fully built yet. Just 1 sec, I might be jumping the gun. I'll just let it build. Yeah, that's because I started it earlier and tested it, and I thought I'd closed it. So be wary of that, because this might... Oh, I think I had it open in incognito. Let's close that down. And now I've closed it down, it should have shut it off. I'll let this build anyway, and then I might actually just cancel the server. Because this is like, basically what I'm running now with Yarn Dev is a hot reload server. So you can run sort of Yarn Start, which is like putting it in production mode, which I'm going to do at the end of the video. Actually, I might actually do that now. I might actually cancel this and go through that. Well, actually, no. This is me in real time, and it uncut. This is my thought process being shown to people on YouTube when I should really plan my videos better. But this is reality, isn't it? This is being a dev. You're constantly second guessing yourself. Right, it's going for this port. So let's just have a... Well, there you go. It's worked. So you can see this is mine, look, because I've got my groceries in there, which are my sauces and beans and that. And there it is, look, we've got our mayo. And we've got a product page. And we can add to cart. And obviously this is all static content, but this is working. And I mean, here we go. Right, so the next step then. So that's all set up and running. Let us know in the comments at this point if you've got stuck or if you've had any trouble. Hopefully myself or anybody else watching this video can comment and help you out. But if you follow those steps that I've just done, as you've seen, it does get it set up and working. Right, I am going to put this in production mode now because there is one drawback. I promised you it. I'm going to show you the drawback. So I've killed that, and I'm going to do yarn. First of all, you've got to build it. You can't run yarn start without building it first. So I'm going to run build, and what build does is it creates all the sort of static assets into probably a dist folder, and I should see it appear in here. Oh no, it probably build it to the Nuxt folder actually. Dist folder is when I'm building a static app out. So your Nuxt folder is the folder what serves the production site essentially. Let that build out. I know these things take a while. If it takes too long, I'll skip the videos for you, so I'll be back quicker. So while this is building, like 67% through there, I'm going to say I've been doing a lot of work recently, and I've done a couple of live streams on it because I am obsessed with page speed. I'm obsessed with it. And from my perspective as being a Magento developer and a JavaScript developer who builds headless apps and things like that also, page speed is one of them things where I was always under the impression that a headless app is always going to be faster than a monolithic platform because of the weight it's carrying behind it. Now I think this is where Magento is like, I don't know whether it was by accident, but because it's served via static assets, it's getting quite hard to beat. Like I showed you, like I can get above 90 on a on a mobile, and I can get up to 100 on a desktop. Granted, we're talking demo stores, but they were quite big pages, and I did show my evidence in terms of the amount of images, the amount of sort of sliders I was showing. That I want cutting corners in terms of the on-page content. So I would assume that this, being a Magento-based Vue Nuxt application, that its page speed scores should be 100, right? This should be 9900 because it's a static site essentially. I know it's server-side rendered, but it still should be, from a page speed perspective, fast, right? You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to run a lighthouse score on it. And while that's running, actually, I'm going to run a lighthouse score, because I'm going to show you it in production mode on here. I'm going to run a lighthouse score because my lighthouse scores locally, as we've seen in other videos I've done in my live streams, they are affected by what's running on my laptop at the time, because obviously there's it's a server essentially in it. So I'm going to run this lighthouse score on this demo store here. And I'm going to run it for mobile. And I expect a good score. I expect a good score here. And I don't get one. And it gives me this excuse that's never come up before, and I'm wondering whether it's because I've got a Vue extension, you know, for in detecting Vue, because this is in production mode. This is their production demo store, right? Alright, let's be fair to them. Let's run it in incognito. Let's see what we get. It is fast. I mean, it's that loaded quick then, right? That loaded quick. So in terms of perceived page speed, these sites are really fast. They're great. But I'm obsessed with actual page speed. I'm obsessed with this and GT metrics and how you can refine your code as a developer to be. Because let's face it, this store ain't going to compete with my Magento out on the internet, out in the wilderness. Mine's got a better page speed score. My static Magento, my monolith has got almost twice as good a page speed score as this. And it looks to me like they're fucked up somehow with this total blocking time, because this is one of the easiest things to sort out in Magento by adding widths and heights to images, that looks like they're there. They're loading background images by the looks of these. Now, obviously, I don't want to talk shit about this because it's been put together by absolute experts, better people than me, don't get me wrong. And if they can come back to me on this video and tell me why we're getting such bad page speed scores on their demo, then I would love that. I mean, somebody please share it with them. I'd love it. I'm not doing this just to be an arsehole and just to call people out. I'm doing this because I am obsessed with page speed, and I would have expected this to be like bang up there. I just want to show you, yeah, this is all being built out. So if I do Nuxt start, and it isn't actually Nuxt start, so just to show you the last thing, it's actually Nuxt start local. It isn't, it's yarn start local, which runs Nuxt start. And this should run, it's already in use, right? I need to sack that off.
No, not the bleach. Eddie!
Right, sorry, look. So I had to just search how to remind myself how to kill a port. So, here for reference, elseoff, and this is on a Linux machine, so it might work on a Mac actually as well. If you get stuck on port 3000, you can't remember why you run it, but you know, if that process gets stuck. So you have a look for the port, that brings up the process number, and it came up with this process number, so then you do kill 9, -9, look, and then the process number, and then it actually kills that. So let's give that a go now. There we go. We're up and running. So this is it in production mode, server-side rendered. If I go to beans, there's a category. You can apply filters for this one. Apply filters. There you go. So things are working. You can get right through to the checkout, and you can basically have a play with it. It's pretty cool. Obviously, in terms of customizations and stuff, the scope for the videos on that, this was just an install video. I hope that's been useful. And as I say, it's brilliant software, and there is a use for it, 100%. But for me, as a Magento dev, until this can guarantee me the right kind of page speeds without me having to do a load more work, which I'm already doing in Magento, then I'm sticking with Magento. I'm sticking with the traditional. I really am. I can't recommend this to clients at the moment. Great stuff. If you like this content, please like it, subscribe to my channel. Only I think 40% here actually subscribe, so if you could subscribe to my channel, that'd be amazing. I do live streams. I do live streams each week if I can, just on Magento related topics. And I produce videos when something comes up, like this basically. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one.